"Let your ex watch," Mafia boss said, then lifted her son at the school's crowded fair. The noise of the elementary school fair was a specific kind of torture. It was a chaotic symphony of screaming children, the tinny, looping melody of a rented carousel, and the optimistic shouts of parents trying to wrangle toddlers hopped up on cotton candy. For Emily Varela, the noise was just static, layered over the bone-deep exhaustion that had settled into her marrow. She'd been on her feet since 5 o'clock that morning, pulling a double shift at the diner. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail that did nothing to hide the dark circles under her eyes. Her jeans were clean but faded, and her sneakers had a worn patch near the little toe. She was running on lukewarm coffee and the desperate need to see her son, Leo, smile. Leo, who was 6 years old and the only pure, uncomplicated light in her life, was currently pulling her toward the ring toss. "Mommy, look, the green frog." "I need the green frog," Emily forced a smile, digging in her pocket for the last of her crumpled dollar bills. "Okay, sweetie. Let's see. Maybe one try, huh? We have to be smart with our tickets." Pitiful. Just pitiful. The voice hit her in the back of the neck like a spray of ice water. Emily froze. Every muscle in her body went rigid. She didn't have to turn around. She knew that voice. She knew that particular brand of casual cruelty. She turned slowly. Travis Cordell stood there, radiating the smug, unearned confidence of a man who had never faced a consequence. Her ex-husband. He was dressed in a crisp golf polo that probably cost more than her week's groceries, and his arm was draped possessively around his new fiancée, Crystal. The woman was barely 22, poured into a white sundress, her fingers weighed down by a diamond that Emily actively tried not to look at. "Really? Emily?" Travis continued, his eyes raking over her with open disdain. "Is that what you're wearing to a school event? You look like you just rolled out of bed." "I was working." "Travis," she said, her voice low. She hated this. Hated the way he could shrink her down to nothing with a single sentence. She put a protective hand on Leo's shoulder. "Working?" Travis scoffed, as if the word tasted bad. "That's your excuse for everything, isn't it? Still slinging hash at that greasy spoon? Leo, buddy, look at your mom. Tell her she needs to try harder." Leo, who was usually a ball of sunshine, shrank behind Emily's leg. He hated when Travis used that voice. "Stop it, Travis," Emily said, her voice shaking just enough for him to notice. "Or what?" He laughed, a short, barking sound. Crystal giggled beside him, a high, tinkling sound that set Emily's teeth on edge. "Look at this whole setup. It's pathetic. You're pathetic. He deserves better than this." He gestured vaguely at Leo, as if her son were a prize he decided wasn't worth the upkeep. Emily was about to tell him exactly where he could go when it happened. Leo, trying to get further away from the confrontation, backed into another boy. This boy, older and bigger, shoved him. It wasn't a playful push. It was a mean-spirited, two-handed shove that sent Leo sprawling onto the patchy grass and scattered wood chips. Leo's face crumpled. He didn't cry out, but his eyes filled with tears of shock and embarrassment, and Travis laughed. It was a small sound, but in that moment, it was the loudest thing at the fair. He laughed as his own son lay on the ground, humiliated. Something inside Emily snapped, the exhaustion, the fear, the constant grinding struggle. It all evaporated, replaced by a cold, white-hot fury. She was in front of Leo in a second, pulling him up, brushing dirt from his jeans and the palms of his hands. "Are you okay, baby? Are you hurt?" Leo just shook his head, burying his face in her stomach. Emily turned on the bigger boy. "You do not push him." "Do you understand me?" The boy's mother, who had been on her phone, looked up defensively. "Boys will be boys. Maybe you should watch your kid." "Maybe you should teach yours not to assault people," Emily shot back, her voice like flint. "Whoa, Emily, calm down," Travis said, suddenly playing the peacemaker, which was his favorite role to adopt in public. "Don't make a scene. It's just roughhousing. You're always so dramatic." "He laughed," Emily whispered, staring at Travis with a new, profound kind of hatred. "You stood there and laughed at your son. Oh, for God's sake, it was funny. He looked like a little turtle." That was when the man stepped in. He hadn't been part of the conversation. He'd been standing 20 feet away, near the lemonade stand, holding a small pink teddy bear. He was dressed simply: dark jeans, a black Henley that stretched across a broad chest and shoulders, and a lightweight gray jacket. He looked casual, but there was nothing casual about him. He moved with a quiet, deliberate economy, and the air around him felt 10 degrees cooler. He had been watching, not just for the last 30 seconds, but for the last 5 minutes. Domenico Ferrano was only at the fair to pick up his cousin's daughter. He hated these things, the noise, the forced cheerfulness, but he had seen the woman with the tired eyes and the worn-out shoes. He had seen the weasel of an ex-husband arrive, dripping arrogance. He had watched her defend her son, a small lioness with no backup. And he had seen the man laugh when the boy fell. That was what made him move. He didn't address Travis. He didn't address the other mother. He didn't even address Emily at first. He walked right up to the small, silent group, his presence sucking the air out of the conversation. He crouched slightly, so his eyes were level with Leo's. His voice, when it came, was a low, resonant rumble. That was a hard fall. "You okay, kid?" Leo, peeking out from behind his mother's legs, nodded shyly. "That's good. You're tough." Domenico stood up to his full height, which was considerable. He looked at Emily, his eyes a dark, unreadable brown, holding hers for a beat. There was no pity in his gaze, but there was a profound, unnerving understanding. Then, before Emily could even process what was happening, he bent down and, with an ease that was almost shocking, scooped Leo up in one smooth motion. He settled the 6-year-old on his shoulders. Leo, startled, let out a squeak, which quickly turned into a delighted giggle. Suddenly, he was the tallest person at the fair. He could see everything. Everyone stared. The other mother's defensive look melted into confusion. The crowd noise around them seemed to dim. Emily's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Domenico Ferrano looked past Emily, his gaze locking directly onto Travis Cordell. Travis, who had been smirking moments before, now looked like he'd swallowed a rock, and then Domenico spoke. His voice wasn't a shout. It was clear, cold, and carried perfectly. "Let your ex watch." It was a statement, a command, a judgment. Travis's face cycled through a universe of emotions, confusion, anger, and then, as the words settled, a deep, blotchy, painful red. It was the color of pure, undiluted humiliation. He was being dismissed, erased, and made irrelevant in front of his new fiancée, his ex-wife, and a crowd of suburban parents, all by a man who had just effortlessly claimed his son. Crystal looked from Travis to Dom, her painted mouth hanging open, suddenly realizing her diamond-clad partner was not the most powerful man in the vicinity. Dom turned his attention back to Emily. He gave Leo a small, approving pat on the leg. "You see the green frog from up there?" "I see him," Leo yelled, pointing. "Mommy, I see him." Emily finally found her voice, though it was breathy and weak. Thank you. You didn't have to. Who are you?" Domenico carefully lifted Leo off his shoulders and set him down on his feet, right next to Emily. He reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small, heavy piece of cardstock. It was matte black, with a name embossed in simple, severe silver lettering, Domenico Ferrano. Below it, a single phone number. "He's a good kid," Dom said, his voice low again, just for her. "He shouldn't have to see that." Emily fumbled, taking the card. The weight of it was surprising. "Thank you. Mr. Ferrano." He nodded once. He didn't smile. His eyes lifted from her and found Travis one last time. It wasn't a glare. A glare was emotional. This was a void. It was a silent, absolute warning. It was the look of a predator assessing a non-threat. It promised nothing good. Travis physically recoiled, taking a small step backward and pulling Crystal with him. Domenico Ferrano handed the pink teddy bear to a little girl who ran up, calling him Uncle Dom, and then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd as if he were never there. Emily stared at the black card in her hand, her own hand trembling so badly she could barely read the name. Leo was tugging on her other hand, chattering happily about how high he was. Travis and Crystal were gone. They hadn't said goodbye. They had simply vanished. Later that night, long after Leo was asleep in his small bed, Emily sat at her kitchen table. The apartment was quiet, the only sound the hum of the old refrigerator. She'd put the card on the table, staring at it as she nursed a cup of lukewarm tea. Domenico Ferrano. The name was unfamiliar, but it felt important. Weighted. She opened her laptop, the screen illuminating her tired face, her fingers, still sore from carrying hot plates, hesitated over the keyboard. She typed the name. The screen filled instantly. News articles, business profiles, tabloid whispers, Ferrano Group, Ferrano Enterprises, Ferrano Syndicate. She clicked the first link, a profile in a business journal. It called him a reclusive titan of industry, specializing in import, export, and private logistics. She clicked the next link, a major news report from 2 years prior. This one used different words. Ferrano crime family. Infamous boss. The city's most powerful and dangerous man. Emily's blood went cold. She read about a bloody syndicate war 5 years ago, about rivals who had disappeared, about a vast, sprawling empire built on loyalty, business, and, according to the whispers, blood. This was the man who had put her son on his shoulders. This was the man who had looked at Travis with those dead, calm eyes. This was the man whose business card was sitting on her kitchen table. Her breath hitched. She felt nauseated. The man at the fair had seemed protective. Kind, even, in his own stark way. The man on the screen was a monster, a mob boss. A sharp, polite knock on her apartment door made her jump so violently she nearly fell out of her chair. She froze. It was past 10 o'clock at night. She never had visitors. She crept to the door, her heart hammering against her ribs. She looked through the peephole. A young man in a simple, dark polo shirt stood there. He wasn't looking at the door, but at the hallway, scanning. "Who is it?" she called, her voice trembling. "Delivery for Miss Varela," the man said, his voice flat. He looked into the peephole, and she saw he was young, maybe 25, with a professional, blank expression. She hesitated, then unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. Leaving the chain on, the man didn't try to look in. He gestured to 2 large cardboard boxes on the floor next to him. "This is for you. I didn't order anything." "We know," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, blue box from a children's shoe store. He placed it carefully on top of the grocery boxes. "Have a good night, ma'am." He turned and walked down the hall to the elevator without a backward glance. Emily stared, shaking. She unhooked the chain and pulled the heavy boxes inside. She opened them on her kitchen floor. It wasn't just groceries. It was everything. Milk, eggs, real butter, fresh bread from a bakery she couldn't afford, a thick cut of steak, fresh fruits, strawberries, blueberries, apples, cereal for Leo, pasta, a jar of sauce that looked homemade, and the shoebox. She opened it. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, were a brand new pair of sneakers, red and white, with lightning bolts on the side, the exact ones Leo had pointed at in a store window 2 weeks ago, the ones she had pretended not to see because she couldn't afford them. They were his exact size, tucked under the lid of the top grocery box. She found it. A small, folded note, not on the black cardstock, but on thick, cream-colored paper. The handwriting was clean, strong, and simple. It was only 6 words. You shouldn't have to struggle. There was no name. It didn't need one. Emily sank onto her linoleum floor, surrounded by the scent of fresh bread and the sight of those bright red shoes. She didn't know what to do. This was not a gift. It was a statement. This was a man who saw what he wanted, a man who fixed problems. This was a man who made people disappear. She looked at the food. She thought of her empty fridge. She thought of Leo's worn-out sneakers by the door. To accept this was dangerous. To return it might be worse. Emily Varela, who had faced down her abusive ex-husband and defended her son, felt a new, colder kind of fear. She was in territory she didn't understand, and she was terribly, completely alone. The red sneakers sat by the door, a blazing symbol of her impossible situation. For 3 days, Emily had stared at them, and at the food filling her refrigerator, food she and Leo had eaten, because she was too proud to accept charity but too poor to let it rot. She couldn't keep it, but she couldn't return the food they had already consumed. So she did the next best thing. She put the brand new sneakers back in their box, tucked the cream-colored note inside, and found an hour between her morning shift and picking Leo up from daycare. The Ferrano Group building was a tower of black glass and steel that pierced the downtown skyline. It didn't look like a criminal enterprise. It looked like a monument to untaxed wealth. Emily walked in, her worn-out sneakers squeaking on the polished marble floor. She felt her diner uniform, clean but smelling faintly of coffee and bleach, like a coat of shame. A woman at the front desk, who looked more like a model than a receptionist, looked up with a polite, vacant smile. "Can I help you?" I'm here to see Domenico Ferrano," Emily said, her voice barely a whisper. She clutched the shoebox to her chest. The woman's smile didn't falter, but her eyes went cold. "Mr. Ferrano sees people by appointment only. Do you have one?" "No, but he gave me this." She slid the heavy black business card across the desk. The receptionist's eyes flicked to the card, and her entire demeanor changed. The polite mask was replaced by a sudden, sharp attention. "One moment, please." She spoke quietly into a headset. Less than 30 seconds later, the young, blank-faced man who had delivered the groceries appeared from a private elevator. He nodded at Emily. "This way, ma'am." They rode up in silence. The elevator was silent, fast, and lined with dark, grained wood. When the doors opened, it was directly into an office that looked more like a penthouse apartment. It was vast, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a god's-eye view of the city. The furniture was minimal, expensive, and masculine, and at the far end, behind a desk that looked like it was carved from a single piece of dark wood, sat Domenico Ferrano. He stood when she entered. He was not in a suit, but in dark trousers and a perfectly fitted gray shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his forearms. He looked just as he had at the fair, powerful, quiet, and utterly intimidating. "Miss Varela," he said. His voice was the same low rumble. "Please sit." "I'm not staying," Emily said, her voice shaking. She walked forward and placed the shoebox on the edge of his massive desk. It looked tiny and pathetic. "I'm here to return this." Dom looked at the box, then at her. He didn't move. "They're the wrong size?" "No, they're the right size. That's the problem." Her heart was hammering. I appreciate the groceries. My son appreciated them. But I can't accept this." She gestured to the box. But she meant all of it. The office, the power, the man. "I can't be bought. Mr. Ferrano." There was a long, heavy silence. Emily's stomach twisted, wondering if she'd just insulted a man who made people disappear. Finally, he nodded. A slow, appraising gesture. He didn't look angry. If anything, he looked respected. "I didn't think you could be..." He walked around the desk, not toward her, but toward the wall of windows. "I didn't send them to buy you. Emily, I sent them because I saw a mother working herself to the bone and a good kid who deserved a pair of shoes." "That's not your concern," she said, though her voice wavered. "No," he agreed. "It's not." He turned to face her. "Would you like a coffee? You look like you haven't slept in a week." What? "Coffee. It's just coffee." He gestured to a sleek, built-in machine in the corner. "It's not a bribe. It's a courtesy. Sit down, please." She was so tired. Her legs ached, her head ached, and the fight was draining out of her. Against her better judgment, she sank into one of the plush leather chairs facing his desk. He brought her a small, white cup of coffee. It was black, strong, and smelled like heaven. "I don't offer pity, Emily," he said, taking the chair opposite her, creating a space of intimacy in the vast room. "I offer protection. There's a difference." "Protection from what? From my ex-husband?" She laughed, a bitter, sharp sound. "You don't even know him." "I know the type," Dom said, his voice flat. Men who get loud when they feel small. Men who mistake cruelty for strength. I saw him laugh when his son fell. His eyes met hers, and she saw a flicker of something dark and old in their depths. That's not something I tolerate. Emily sipped the coffee. It burned a good path down her throat. Why? She asked, emboldened by the caffeine and her own exhaustion. Why do you care? You don't know me. You don't know my son. Dom looked away, out the window, at the city sprawling below. He was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. I lost someone, he said, his voice so quiet she had to lean in. A long time ago. She was everything, and my life, my business. It put her in the crosshairs. They took her from me. He paused, and his jaw tightened. She was carrying our son. The confession hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Emily's breath caught. This wasn't in the newspapers. This was real. I couldn't protect them, he said, his voice devoid of all emotion, which was more terrifying than rage. I see a good mother, a good kid, and a weak man trying to hurt them. I don't look away. I can't. He stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. Keep the shoes, Emily, or throw them away, but let Leo wear them. A kid shouldn't have to pay for his father's sins. He left her there, walking into a back room. The young man appeared at the elevator. Miss Varela, I'll take you down. She left the shoebox on the desk. But when she got home, it was sitting outside her apartment door. The next week, a sleek black car was waiting for her outside her building. The same young man, whose name she learned was Sal, was at the wheel. Mr. Ferrano thought you could use a ride to the school. I can't accept this. With respect, ma'am, it's easier if you do. I'm just dropping you and the boy. Then I'm gone. It's safer than the bus, she argued, but Sal was politely immovable. It was, she admitted, easier. Leo thought the fancy car was the best thing ever, but as Sal pulled up to the school, Emily's stomach dropped. Travis was there. He was leaning against his flashy sports car, Crystal at his side. He clearly had no intention of actually going inside, but he was making a show of being present. His eyes tracked the black sedan as it pulled to the curb. He saw Sal, in his dark suit, get out and open the door for Emily. He saw her step out, followed by Leo. Travis's face went from smug to confused to a dark, furious red. He didn't see a man helping a struggling mother. He saw his pitiful ex-wife, who he thought he'd broken, being chauffeured by the kind of men he only saw in movies. He saw power, and it wasn't his. He started toward them, his face a mask of rage. Emily, what the hell is this? Whose car is that? Sal stepped neatly between Emily and Travis. He didn't touch him. He just stood there. He was half of Travis's bulk, but seemed to take up twice the space. Have a good day at school. Leo, Sal said, his voice calm, completely ignoring Travis. Travis stopped, looking at Sal's impassive face. He recognized the cold, professional lack of fear. It was something he didn't have and didn't understand. He looked from Sal to Emily, his eyes narrowing with a new, venomous suspicion. He said nothing, but his silence was louder than his usual insults. He grabbed Crystal's arm and stalked away. That Friday night, the diner was slow. Emily was wiping down the counter, her feet aching, her mind replaying that confrontation at the school. She hadn't seen or heard from Travis since, which was almost more unnerving. The bell above the diner door jingled. Domenico Ferrano walked in. The two regulars at the bar, old Mr. Henderson and a truck driver named Al, stopped talking. The cook peeked out from the kitchen. Dom was wearing a dark, impeccably tailored suit, and he looked as out of place in the greasy spoon as a panther in a petting zoo. He ignored the stares and slid onto a stool at the far end of the counter, the one in the shadows. Emily, he said, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Mr. Ferrano, we're closing in an hour. I know, I'll just have a coffee. She poured him a cup, her hand trembling. You really shouldn't be here. People talk. Let them, he said, wrapping his large hands around the cheap white mug. He watched her work, his eyes missing nothing. That was when the door opened again, this time. It was a man she didn't know. He was big, drunk, and mean-looking. He stumbled to the counter and slammed his hand down, rattling the sugar shakers. "Hey, beautiful, give me a beer." "Sorry, sir, we just serve coffee and food. No alcohol." "I said," the man snarled, leaning into her space, "give me a beer, or maybe I'll just take you." He reeked of cheap whiskey and sweat. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The man laughed and lunged, his hand grabbing her wrist. "Or what, sweetheart?" Before Emily could even scream, a shadow moved. Dom was off his stool. He hadn't made a sound. He was just there. He didn't touch the man. He didn't speak. He just looked at him. His eyes, which had been warm and unreadable with her, were now black, flat, and full of a cold, bottomless violence. It was a look that promised pain and endings. The drunk man froze. His bravado evaporated, replaced by the primal, sudden fear of a prey animal. He looked from Dom's face to the perfect suit and back to the terrifying emptiness in his eyes. He let go of Emily's wrist as if it were on fire. I was just leaving," he stammered, backing away, his hands up. He turned and practically ran from the diner, the bell jangling wildly in his wake. The diner was silent. "Mister." Henderson was staring into his cup. Al was looking at the ceiling. Dom turned back to Emily. The coldness was gone, replaced by a quiet concern. "Are you hurt?" She was shaking, rubbing the red mark on her wrist. "No, thank you." He placed a $20 bill on the counter. Far too much for a coffee. "Walk me out?" She untied her apron and followed him out the back door, into the alley. The air was cool and smelled of dumpsters and rain. She leaned against the brick wall, trying to get her breath. "You see?" he said, his voice low. "That's why I'm here." That was terrifying. He was a drunk fool. There are worse things out there. Emily. They stood in the charged silence. The single bare bulb above the door cast long shadows. She could see the lines of exhaustion around his eyes. He looked at her, and his gaze was heavy, tracing the line of her jaw, the pulse fluttering in her throat. Her hands trembled. His eyes were full of a restraint that felt like it was costing him. The air was thick, pulling them closer. He wanted to touch her. She wanted to let him. "You should have a bodyguard," he said, his voice rough. The words shattered the moment. No bodyguards. I can't. I'm just Emily. I work at a diner. I want a normal life. Mr. Ferrano, I can't be part of whatever this is." He nodded, but his eyes were hard with a knowledge she didn't have. "His name is Dom, and a normal life is a luxury. Emily, not a guarantee." He turned and walked down the alley, disappearing into the darkness. The guarantee of a normal life was officially revoked the next evening. Travis was waiting for her, lurking by her apartment door. "Where have you been?" he demanded, his voice tight with a cold fury she hadn't heard since the divorce. "Working. Travis, what do you want?" "I want to know who he is," he hissed, backing her against the wall. "The man in the suit, the one in the car. Who is he?" "He's a friend." Travis laughed, a truly ugly sound. "A friend? Emily, I ran the plates. I made some calls. Do you know who that is? That's Domenico Ferrano, a gangster, a killer. Are you insane? Are you sleeping with him? That's none of your business." "It is my business," he roared, slamming his hand against the wall next to her head. "It's my business when you endanger my son. You are exposing Leo to criminals." Emily flinched, her heart seizing. "I will not have it," Travis sneered, his face close to hers. "You stop this. Now, you cut him off. Or I swear to God, Emily, I will take you to court, I will file for full custody, and I will win. No judge in the world will let a child stay with a woman who is dating a mafia boss. You will lose him." He stepped back, adjusting his jacket. "It's your choice, him or your son." He left her trembling in the hallway. For 2 days, Emily was paralyzed by fear. She didn't call Dom. She didn't answer the one time Sal called. She took the bus. She was cold to Leo, and then cried about it after he went to bed. Then, on the 3rd day, the silence from Travis became deafening. He didn't call. He didn't text. He didn't show up. It was unlike him. She was coming home from her shift when she saw it. Travis's car was parked down the street, but Travis wasn't in it. Two men she didn't know, both in dark suits, were leaning against it, talking to him. Travis looked pale. He was nodding, his hands shaking. The men weren't touching him. They didn't have to. When they were done, one of them clapped Travis on the shoulder, a gesture that looked nothing like comfort, and they got into their own car and drove away. Travis scrambled into his car and sped off. Burning rubber. Emily knew. She knew, as surely as she was breathing, that Dom had done it. She marched up to her apartment, her terror replaced by a blinding, righteous anger. She didn't have his number, but she had the card. She called the number on the black card. Ferrano Group. I need to speak to Domenico. Tell him it's Emily Varela. He's in a meeting, ma'am. I don't care if he's in a meeting with the president. You get him on the phone or I will come down there and... That won't be necessary. Emily, I'm here. She whirled around. Dom was standing at the end of her hallway, by the elevators. He must have been on his way to see her. He held his phone in his hand, his expression unreadable. She hung up and stalked toward him. You did it, didn't you? Did what? You threatened him. You sent your men to threaten Travis. I sent 2 men to have a conversation, Dom said, his voice calm as he walked toward her. I told them to make the custody situation clear. He's not to threaten what's under my name. Under your name, she cried, her voice echoing in the hallway. I am not under your name. Leo is not under your name. You don't get to do that. You don't get to interfere in my life without asking. He threatened to take your son, Emily. And you made it worse. Now he thinks I'm a gangster's girlfriend. He has more ammunition, not less. You don't understand. You fix things with muscle and fear. And that's not how the real world works. The anger, the fear, the exhaustion of the last week, the last 5 years, suddenly crashed over her. Her knees buckled. The fight didn't just leave her, it was ripped out. He's going to take my baby, she whispered, the words catching in her throat. He's going to take my son. She started to cry. Not quiet, dignified tears, but ugly, gulping sobs of pure terror and despair. In 2 long strides, Dom was there. He didn't hesitate. He pulled her against his chest, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other wrapping around her waist, holding her up. He didn't say, "It's okay." He didn't say, "Don't cry." He just held her. He held her as she fell apart, absorbing her sobs into the fine wool of his suit. He was so solid, so warm. He smelled of clean soap and something dark and male. She clutched his shirt, her fists tightening as the storm ragged through her. When the sobs finally subsided into shudders, he still didn't let go. He just rubbed her back, a slow, steady circle. "I won't let him," he murmured into her hair. "I will not let him take your son. I promise you." She looked up at him, her face tear-stained, her eyes red. How? How can you promise that? Because he's a coward, Dom said, his eyes on hers. And I am not. He used his thumb to wipe a tear from her cheek. The touch was gentle. It was calloused. It sent a jolt through her that had nothing to do with fear. The space between them, which had been filled with her anger and his power, was now something else. It was quiet. It was intimate. She was still in his arms, her hands on his chest. She could feel his heart, a slow, steady beat beneath her palms. He looked at her, his gaze dropping to her mouth. He didn't move, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. He lowered his head, slowly, cautiously. It was not the kiss of a conqueror. It was the kiss of a man asking permission. His lips brushed hers, soft, questioning. Emily's eyes fluttered shut. She leaned into him. A small, accepting movement. That was all he needed. He kissed her. It was slow and emotional and full of a desperate, restrained longing. It wasn't a kiss of passion, but of a different kind of hunger. It was a kiss of 2 broken, lonely people finding a moment of warmth in the cold. It was cautious, tender, and it tasted faintly of her salt and his strength. The world outside the hallway, outside his embrace, fell away, There was no Travis, no diner, no mafia. There was only the solid wall of his chest and the shockingly gentle pressure of his mouth. Then reality flooded back. What was she doing? Kissing a man who threatened people for a living. A man who had just admitted to a past of violence. A man who was the walking, breathing definition of endangering. She tore her mouth from his, stumbling back, her hands flying to her lips. She hit the wall, her breath coming in gasps. "I can't," she whispered, her eyes wide with a new, different kind of fear. "I can't. This is a mistake." Dom watched her, his expression pained, his own breathing uneven. He didn't try to touch her again. He just nodded, his jaw tight. "Emily," he started. "No," she said, shaking her head, fumbling for her keys. "Please, just go." She unlocked her door and fled inside, locking the deadbolt behind her, her back pressed against the wood, as if she could keep the entire, dangerous world he represented on the other side. The kiss echoed in the silence of her apartment for days. It was a ghost, a warmth she could still feel on her lips, a mistake that had felt more real than anything in her life. Emily threw herself into her work, into Leo, into the pretense of a normal life. She avoided the number on the black card, ignored the memory of his arms, and told herself she was fine. She was not fine. She was terrified. And then, things began to happen. Small, quiet, inexplicable things. Her car, a 15-year-old sedan that rattled like a can of bolts, had been making a sound like a dying engine. She'd been quoted $800 for a new transmission she didn't have. She took it to her usual mechanic, bracing for the bad news. He slid out from under the car, his face baffled. "Emily, I don't know what to tell you. Just give it to me straight. Mike, how bad is it?" "It's not bad," Mike said, wiping grease from his hands. "It's perfect. It's got a brand new, factory-certified transmission. The belts are new. The fluids are topped. I did you do this somewhere else?" "No," she said, confused. "I can't afford it, remember?" Mike just shook his head. "Well, someone can." The invoice was paid in full, cash to the supplier. Anonymous benefactor, I guess. You're good to go. She drove away, the car silent and smooth, her hands gripping the wheel in a white-knuckled panic. A week later, Mr. Petrov, her landlord at the diner, called her. He was a man who only spoke in threats of overdue rent and eviction. "Miss Varela." He grunted into the phone. "Just to inform you, your lease has been handled." "Handled? What do you mean? I have the rent. I just need—" "No, handled," he said, a strange, new note of respect in his voice. "An associate of yours, very professional, paid your lease, in full, for the next 6 months. Emily sank onto a bar stool in the empty diner. 6 months. An associate? Who? Didn't give a name, Petrov said quickly. Just said to make sure the hot water was fixed, too, which it will be, tomorrow. Have a good day, Miss Varela. He hung up. Dom. It was Dom. He was respecting her wish to stay away, but he was still there. A ghost in her checkbook, a mechanic in her engine, a benefactor in her lease. He was fixing her life from the shadows, and it made her feel both safe and suffocated. She was a project, a charity case, a stray he was feeding. The thought made her sick with a confusing mix of gratitude and rage. The real blow came on a Tuesday. Leo was on the floor, building a magnificent tower of blocks, and Emily was actually enjoying a quiet cup of tea. A sharp official knock echoed through the apartment. It wasn't a friendly knock. She opened the door to 2 women in drab, professional suits. They did not smile. "Miss Emily Varela?" the older woman asked, holding a clipboard like a shield. "Yes, I'm Miss Gable, and this is Miss Rhea. We're with Child Protective Services. May we come in?" The floor fell out from under Emily's world. Yes. Is something wrong?" They walked past her, their eyes scanning everything. The clean apartment, the now full refrigerator, the child playing happily on the floor. "We received an anonymous tip. Miss Varela." "Miss," Gable said, her voice flat. "A tip expressing concern for your son, Leo." "Concern?" Emily's voice was a squeak. The report states that you are an unfit mother. Miss. Gable read, her eyes devoid of emotion. It alleges neglect and dangerous associations. It specifically mentions you are willfully exposing the child to known criminals and violent felons. Emily's blood ran cold. The words were a knife. Travis. This was Travis. He was using Dom. He was twisting Dom's quiet protection into a weapon. That's a lie, Emily said, her voice shaking. My ex-husband, This is a custody dispute. He's angry. Is he the known criminal in question? Miss Varela? No, he's a salesman. He's lying. So you have no association with anyone involved in criminal activity? Miss Rhea, the younger one, asked, her pen hovering over a notepad. Emily's mind flashed to Dom, to the headlines, to the man who had looked at a drunk with eyes that promised death. I have a friend, Emily said, choosing her words carefully. He's in business. What kind of business? Import, export, she said, the words feeling like ash in her mouth. The women were not impressed. They inspected Leo's room. They looked at the new, bright red sneakers by the door. They looked in her fridge, their eyebrows raising at the steaks and fresh fruit. You seem to be doing quite well for a diner waitress, Miss Gable noted, her tone implying Emily had somehow stolen the food. I get help, Emily said, feeling trapped. From the importer? He's a friend. They stayed for an hour of quiet, invasive questions that made Emily feel like a criminal in her own home. Leo, sensing the tension, had hidden behind her legs, silent. When they finally left, Miss Gable paused at the door. We found no immediate evidence of neglect. Leo seems fine, but the claims of association are serious. We will be monitoring this case. Miss Varela will be back and will be talking to Mr. Cordell. The moment the door closed, Emily ran to the bathroom and was violently sick. She was in a blind, sobbing panic. She grabbed her phone, her hands shaking so badly she could barely dial. She called Dom's number. Ferrano Group, get me Domenico, now. She was so hysterical she didn't even recognize her own voice. She was on hold for less than a second, so... Emily, what's wrong? His voice was calm, deep, and it made her break. They came here, she sobbed. Social services. They came to my home, Travis. He called them. He told them I was unfit, that I was with criminals. With you. The silence on the other end was heavy, dangerous. They're going to take him. Dom, she cried, sliding down the wall. They're going to take Leo, because of you, because he's using you against me. She took a gasping breath. You have to stay away. Please, I'm begging you. Don't call. Don't send Sal. Don't fix my car. Don't pay my bills. You have to disappear from my life. It's the only way. He's winning because of you. Please, just stay away from us. She waited for him to argue, to roar, to tell her she was wrong. There was a long, heavy pause. She could hear his breathing, slow and controlled. If that's what you want, Emily, he said, his voice stripped of all warmth. The line clicked dead. It was what she wanted. She had to be alone. She had to be normal. The next week was the purest form of hell. The silence from Dom was absolute. No black car, no quiet observers, no one. Her life was suddenly, completely her own. And she was terrified. Leo didn't understand. Where's the fast car, Mommy? He asked, as they waited for the bus in the cold morning rain. Where's the man? He's busy. Sweetie. She lied, her heart cracking. I want to see the man, he'd cried, a full-blown tantrum at the bus stop. I want him. Emily's heart broke. She was protecting him, but it felt like she was punishing him. On Friday, she came home from a double shift to find a small, square box outside her apartment. No note, no delivery man, just a plain brown box. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside, nestled in black tissue paper, was a heavy, die-cast model car, a perfect black sedan, just like the ones Dom's men drove. It was exquisitely detailed, a toy for an adult, not a child. She almost threw it away. But then she saw the bottom. A tiny silver plate was glued to the chassis. She had to hold it under the light to read the engraving. For the bravest boy I know. She sat on her floor and cried, clutching the cold, metal car. She didn't give it to Leo. She hid it in the back of her closet. A secret. Painful reminder. 2 days later, the official, certified mail envelope arrived. She had to sign for it. It was from the office of Travis's lawyer, emergency petition for temporary full custody. She read the words, and the world went gray. The petition was a masterpiece of fiction, built on a foundation of terrifying half-truths. Mother has admitted to associations with known felons. Child's welfare is at risk due to mother's unstable and dangerous lifestyle. Mother is being financially supported by criminal elements, proving she is unable to provide for the child on her own. It was all there. The fixed car, the paid lease, the anonymous groceries. Travis and his lawyer had twisted Dom's help into a noose to hang her with. She was truly alone. Dom was respecting her wishes. He had stepped back, and in his absence, the wolves were at the door. That night, Leo woke up screaming. It wasn't a nightmare scream. It was a sound of pure animal pain. Emily was at his bedside in a second. He was thrashing in his sheets, his face flushed a deep, alarming red. "Mommy, it hurts," he moaned, his voice hoarse. She touched his forehead. He was on fire. Not just warm, he was burning. She fumbled for the digital thermometer. 104.2. "Okay, baby, okay. Mommy's here." She ran for a cool cloth, for the children's fever reducer. He was half delirious, rambling. He couldn't keep the medicine down. She panicked. Her car was at the curb, but it was useless. It wouldn't start. The one time she needed it, the battery was dead. A cab would take an hour. If one even came to her neighborhood at 3 o'clock in the morning, the buses weren't running. She was alone. She was trapped. Her baby was sick. Her hands were shaking so violently she dropped her phone. She picked it up and dialed the only number she could think of, the number she had sworn never to call again. It was 3:15 in the morning. He answered on the first ring. Not hello, just a sharp alert. "Emily." "Dom," she sobbed, the name a prayer. "Leo, he's so hot. He's sick. The thermometer says 104. I can't get the fever down. My car's dead. I'm scared. I'm so scared. I don't know what to do. I'm 5 minutes away." The line clicked dead. It wasn't 5 minutes. It felt like 3. She heard the sound of a powerful engine, a screech of tires. She had Leo wrapped in a blanket. She ran to her door and tore it open. He was there, coming down the hall. No suit, just dark jeans and a black t-shirt, his hair mussed, his jaw dark with stubble. He looked like he had been sleeping, but his eyes were wide awake, clear and fiercely focused. He didn't ask a single question. He just saw her, saw the small bundle in her arms, and held out his own. "Give him to me." She handed her son over. Dom cradled the small, limp boy against his massive chest as if he were made of air. He turned and moved, not running but covering ground with an incredible, urgent speed. He carried Leo down the stairs, Emily scrambling behind him. The black sedan was idling, the passenger door already open. He settled Leo gently in Emily's lap in the back, then got behind the wheel. The drive to the hospital was a blur of illegal turns and impossible speed. They were at the hospital in 4 minutes. Dom was out, opening her door. He didn't wait for her. He scooped Leo from her arms again. "I've got him. You just walk." He walked into the emergency room. Leo held high and tight against his chest, and the entire chaotic room seemed to freeze. The triage nurse, who was in the middle of a loud argument with a drunk, took one look at Dom's face, at the sick child, at the terrifying calm in his eyes. "We have a pediatric fever," the nurse said, her voice suddenly all business. "Room 3, now." They were in a room instantly. A doctor appeared, nurses. They put a tiny oxygen mask on Leo's face. They hooked up an IV. They drew blood. And through it all, Dom stood. He stood in the corner of the room, a silent, immovable guardian. He didn't speak. He didn't sit. He just watched, his presence a silent, heavy promise that no one in this room was to make a mistake. The hospital staff gave him a wide berth. They whispered. They recognized him. This was Domenico Ferrano, the Ferrano boss. in their pediatric wing at 3:30 in the morning, holding a trembling mother's hand, and no one, not a single person, dared to question him. Hours passed. The sky outside the small window turned from black to gray to a sick, pale pink. The fever finally broke. The doctor, a young man who looked exhausted, explained it was a severe viral infection. But Leo was strong. He was responding. He was going to be okay. And then, it was quiet. Leo was finally asleep, his breathing deep and even, his face pale but no longer flushed. The only sound was the steady, rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. Emily was a hollow shell. The adrenaline, the fear, the panic, it had all drained away, leaving her slumped in a hard, plastic chair. Dom moved. He pulled another chair, not next to her, but facing her, close, their knees almost touching. He sat, leaning forward. "He's okay," Dom said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. "I was so scared," she whispered, the tears starting again. Quiet this time, just paths of exhaustion. "When I got those papers, I thought, I can do this. I'll fight him. I told you to go. I thought I had to be alone to be safe. And then tonight, he was so hot, Dom, and I was alone. I've been alone for so long. But this was the worst it's ever been." He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't say, "It's all right." He just listened. Then he reached out, his large, calloused hand covering both of hers as they lay, trembling in her lap. His skin was warm. He was so steady. The gesture broke the last of her defenses. She turned her hands over, her fingers lacing with his, gripping him like a lifeline. The tension of the last 2 weeks, the fear of Travis, the humiliation of the social workers, the ache of the kiss, the terror of the fever, it all unraveled in the quiet, sterile air of the hospital room. She leaned forward, her body aching with exhaustion, and rested her head on his shoulder. It wasn't a conscious choice. It was a surrender. His arm came around her instantly, pulling her close. It wasn't the passionate, desperate grip from the hallway. This was different. This was solid. He held her as if she were made of glass, shielding her. He pulled her against his chest, and she just let go. She rested her head in the curve of his neck, breathing in his scent, soap and starch, and something just him. He kissed her forehead, not a quick peck, but a long, soft, profound pressure. It was a kiss of protection, of comfort, of a million things he couldn't say. It was intimate and tender, and full of a restrained longing that made her heart ache. She dozed, her ear pressed to his chest, the steady, slow beat of his heart lulling her to sleep for the first time in weeks. When she woke, the first real light of morning was streaming in. She was still in his arms. He was still awake. He hadn't slept. He was watching Leo, his expression unreadable. She stirred, and his eyes met hers. "Dom," she said, her voice rough. He waited. "The bodyguard," she said, her voice stronger now, clear and steady. "When we get home, the lawyer, all of it, I accept." She looked at her sleeping child, then back at the mafia boss who had saved him. "I can't do this alone anymore." He nodded once, his eyes holding hers. The relief that washed over his face was so profound it almost looked like pain. He didn't say, "I knew you would." He just squeezed her hand. "Okay, Emily," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Okay." The court date was set for 6 weeks away, the official-looking envelope, the same kind that had delivered Travis's petition, arrived at Emily's apartment. But this one was from the law firm of Rinaldi and Associates. She was sitting at her kitchen table when the man himself arrived. Dom hadn't sent him alone. He'd come with him. Marcus Rinaldi was nothing like the lawyers Emily had seen on television. He was a small, older man in a perfectly tailored, 3-piece pinstripe suit. He wore round, wire-rimmed glasses that gave him the appearance of a scholarly owl, and he radiated an aura of cold, precise lethality that made Dom seem almost warm by comparison. "Miss Varela," he said, his voice a dry rasp. He didn't offer to shake her hand, but simply opened a flawless leather briefcase. "I have reviewed the petition from Mr. Cordell. It is imaginative. He's lying, Emily said, her voice small. Of course he is, Rinaldi said, as if she'd stated the sky was blue. He is also sloppy. He has based his entire claim on your inability to provide and association with criminal elements. We will dismantle both. The first is a simple matter of paperwork, which we have handled. He slid a file across the table. Your diner lease, your car title, your bank account. All are in perfect, stable order, with a significant surplus in a trust I established for Leo this morning. Emily looked at Dom, horrified. You put money in my son's name? My lawyer put money in your son's name, Dom corrected, his voice calm. It's a legal maneuver. Emily, it makes Travis's claim of neglect and inability to provide look not just false, but malicious. It's a shield. And the second matter? Emily asked, turning back to Rinaldi, her head spinning. Ah, yes, the criminal elements, Rinaldi said, a faint, reptilian smile playing on his lips. I will be subpoenaing Mr. Cordell's financial records. I am particularly interested in his new fiancée's spending habits, the source of his down payment on his new sports car, and his tax filings for the last 5 years. Men who accuse others of criminal associations often have untidy bookkeeping of their own. He snapped the briefcase shut. You will do nothing, Miss Varela. You will continue to be a model mother. You will not contact Mr. Cordell. You will let your bodyguard, Sal, handle all drop-offs and pickups. When we go to court, you will wear a blue dress. The judge likes blue. Do not worry. We will not just win. We will bury him. He stood, nodded to Dom, and left. Emily stared at the door, her heart hammering. He's terrifying. He's the best, Dom said, standing from her couch. You're protected. Emily. Legally, physically. Now you just have to live. Living became a strange, new concept. Protected meant Sal. The young, impassive man was a permanent, quiet fixture. He drove her to the diner. He sat in a booth in the back corner, drinking coffee and reading a newspaper. He drove her and Leo to school. He was polite, silent, and made her feel like she was in a witness protection program. But Dom was different. He wasn't just a shadow or a crisis manager anymore. He started to just show up. He appeared at her apartment at 6 o'clock one evening. No threat, no emergency. He just knocked. Leo has a reading assignment, she said, flustered, as she let him in. I know, Dom said. Leo, who was struggling with a book about a brown bear, ran to him. Mr. D, I can't. This word is stupid. No word is stupid, Leo, Dom rumbled, sitting on her worn floor, his knees practically at his chin. He pulled the boy into the circle of his arms. Sounded out, St. R. What sound does that make? Emily watched from the kitchen, her hand over her mouth. She was watching the most feared man in the city patiently teach her 6-year-old son about silent letters, his large, scarred hands that had likely done things she could never imagine, rested gently on Leo's back. He stayed for dinner. Emily, feeling a flush of gratitude, made spaghetti, the one thing she was good at. Dom, watching her, said, I can cook, too. The following Tuesday, he proved he could not. He showed up with bags of groceries, not the anonymous delivery, but bags he'd clearly chosen himself. I'm making dinner, he announced. Leo was thrilled. Emily was terrified. It was unequivocally a disaster. He had no concept of how to chop an onion. He tried to cut it in half, his large hands fumbling with her small knife, and swore under his breath as the fumes hit his eyes. You're crying, Leo giggled. I am not crying, Dom said, his voice gruff as he wiped his eyes on his sleeve. It's the onion. It's disrespectful. He put chicken in a pan without oil. He set off the smoke alarm. He boiled pasta until it was a single, congealed white mass, and Emily laughed. It wasn't a nervous titter. It was a real, deep belly laugh, the kind she hadn't let out in years. Leo, seeing her laugh, started laughing too. Dom stood in the smoke-filled kitchen, a spatula in one hand, covered in flour she still didn't know the purpose of, and a small, defeated smile touched his lips as he watched them. They ate cereal for dinner. It was the best meal Emily had ever had. The new domesticity was a fragile, beautiful bubble. But Travis was the needle. He saw them. At a school pickup, he was there. His face pale and thin, looking jittery. He must have received the first notices from Rinaldi's office. He saw Leo, who, upon spotting Dom leaning against his black sedan, yelled, Mr. D, and ran, launching himself into the man's arms. Dom caught him effortlessly, a real, genuine smile breaking across his face as he swung the boy up. Travis watched as this stranger, this criminal, this man, was given the affection and the name that he himself had thrown away. He watched Emily walk up to Dom, a quiet smile on her face, a shared look passing between them. He intercepted her as she was walking back to her own car, Dom and Leo safely out of earshot. Mr. D, he hissed, his voice trembling with a venomous, impotent rage. That's what you're calling him? You're replacing me. With him? Go away, Travis. Sal is right there. I don't care about your goon, he snarled, grabbing her arm. You think this is a game? You think Rinaldi scares me? You want to play this way? Fine. I'm not just going to fight for custody. Emily, I'm going to make you disappear legally. I will prove you're unstable, an unfit, paranoid, delusional woman who is a danger to my son. I will have you declared mentally incompetent. You will never see him again. You will cease to exist. Sal was there in an instant, his hand not on Travis, but on Emily's other arm, gently pulling her back. We're leaving, Miss Varela. Travis just laughed, a high, desperate sound. You'll both see. That night, Emily was a wreck. Leo was asleep. She was sitting on her sofa in the dark, shaking. Dom showed up. He didn't knock. Sal must have let him in the main building, and he used his own key, a key she hadn't even known he had. The quiet click of the lock was a small invasion, but she found she didn't care. He sat beside her in the darkness. She told him what Travis said. He can't do that, Dom said, his voice a low growl. Can he? She whispered. He's a salesman. Dom, he lies for a living. He's charming, and I'm just a tired waitress. Who do you think they'll believe? It doesn't matter, he said, turning to her. His presence filled the small sofa. I'm here. She looked at him, the man who set off her smoke alarm, the man who taught her son to read, the man who had a lawyer that could bury people. Thank you, she said, her voice thick. Her hand, of its own accord, lifted. She didn't touch his face. She touched his arm, his hand, her fingers tracing the strong, ropey lines of his forearm. You've done so much, she breathed. Her fingers grazed his wrist, then moved up. Under the cuff of his shirt, she felt it, a thick, raised line of old, healed-over skin, a scar. She stopped. She traced it, a question in her touch. It was long, from his wrist to his elbow, hidden by his expensive shirts. His entire body went rigid, but he didn't pull away. She looked up at him. His eyes were dark, his jaw tight. This was the man from the news articles. This was the violence. Her fingers, instead of recoiling, grew bolder. She traced the scar, a feather-light touch, as if she could read the story in his skin. He closed his eyes, his breathing hitching. Emily, he said, his voice a warning, but not to her, to himself. It doesn't scare me, she whispered, which was only half a lie. She leaned in, her other hand came up, resting on his chest, feeling the heavy, thudding beat of his heart. She saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the deep, profound loneliness that matched her own. You're not a monster, she said, her own confession. His eyes opened, and they were full of a raw, desperate hunger that made her shiver. His hand came up, not to her face but to her hair, his fingers burying themselves in the soft strands. Don't say that unless you mean it, he rasped. He pulled her closer. Their mouths were an inch apart. The air was so thick, so charged. It was a physical thing. It was the alley. It was the hospital. It was every moment of restraint, every held-back touch, every unspoken word, all culminating in her living room. She saw the battle in his face, the wanting, the need, and the deep, profound respect that was holding him back. He was the one who pulled away. He stood up, his breathing rough, his hands clenched at his sides. I can't. Emily stared at him, her own body aching with the unresolved tension. Why? He turned to her, his face a mask of agony. Because I need to know it's a choice. Not because you're grateful, not because I'm protecting you, not because you're scared and I'm here. I need you to be choosing me. And you're not ready. Not yet. He walked to the door, his shoulders set. Lock this behind me. I'll have Sal stay on the landing. He left her in the dark, her body humming, her heart broken and soaring all at once. The real world, Dom's world, came crashing in 2 days later. It was the most mundane of places, the parking lot of the grocery store. It was afternoon. Emily was loading bags into her perfectly running car. Sal was standing by the passenger door, watchful, a dark blue sedan, not one of Dom's, pulled up, blocking them in. Emily's heart seized. It wasn't Travis. A man got out of the passenger side. He was smiling, but his eyes were dead. He wore a cheap suit and too much cologne. Emily Varela, he said, his voice a slimy drawl. You're prettier than they said. My boss, Mr. Volpe. He's a rival of your new benefactor. Sal was moving before the man finished his sentence. He was in front of Emily, his body a shield. Get in the car, Miss Varela. Lock the doors. We're not here to hurt her, friend, the man said, holding his hands up, still smiling. We're just delivering a message, Mr. Ferrano. He's stepping outside his territory. He's moving on families he shouldn't be. He's getting soft, emotional. You tell him. From Mr. Volpe. A man can't protect his property when he's busy protecting strays. He looked past Sal, his dead eyes locking on Emily. You and the kid, you're a liability, sweetheart. He's gonna get you both killed. Sal, Emily whispered, her voice paralyzed by terror. Sal didn't speak. He just stared the man down. The man's smile faltered. He saw the cold, professional promise in Sal's eyes. He nodded, as if a point had been made. Message delivered, he said, and got back in the car. It sped away. Emily was shaking so hard she dropped her keys. Sal retrieved them. He put her in the car, locked the doors, and got on his radio. He spoke in a code she didn't understand. His voice was no longer polite. It was cold. It was the voice of a soldier. By the time they got back to her apartment, the city felt different, quieter, more sirens. Dom was at her door in less than an hour. This was not Mr. D. This was not the man who couldn't cook. This was the Ferrano boss. He was vibrating with a cold, controlled fury. His suit was perfect, but his eyes were black. He walked in, checked on Leo, who was sleeping, and then turned to her in the living room. He didn't yell, he didn't pace. He just stood there, looking at her, and she could feel the rage, the fear, and the self-loathing rolling off him in waves. He's right, Dom said, his voice a terrifyingly quiet rasp. I did this. I put you in their line of sight. I made you a target. Everything he said, Volpe. He's right. Dom, no. He called you a stray, Dom said, his fist clenching. He called you a liability because of me. He was blaming himself, the parking lot, the woman he'd lost years ago. It was all happening again, and it was his fault. You should go, he said, his voice dead. I can have Rinaldi set you up, a new life, anywhere. New names, you and Leo. You'd be safe, away from me. He was offering to cut her loose, to let her disappear, just like Travis threatened. But this would be a safe disappearance. Emily looked at him, the most powerful man she'd ever met, looking at her as if he were already defeated, the man who had pulled back on her sofa because he respected her choice, and in that moment she made one. She walked up to him, right into his space, into the storm of his fury and guilt. She put her hands on his chest, right over his heart. It was hammering, just like hers. You're not just someone I'm protecting, he whispered, his face a mask of pain. You're someone I care about. I know, she said. That's why I'm not running. She rose on her toes and kissed him. It was slow. It was tender. It was not a kiss of passion, but of decision. It was her answer. I choose you. I choose this. I'm not astray. I'm home." He froze, shocked, then with a groan that sounded like it was torn from his soul, he kissed her back. This time, they didn't stop. His hands came up, cupping her face, his kiss deepening, becoming desperate. It was the kiss from the hallway, the kiss from the sofa, the kiss they had been denying for weeks. It was a release. It was a promise. He broke the kiss, his forehead resting against hers, his breathing ragged. "Emily, are you sure? Because if we do this, there's no going back. You'll be mine. In their eyes, in my world, I'm sure," she said, her hands moving from his chest, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I'm not scared of them. I'm scared of being alone again." That was all he needed. He kissed her again, but this time it was different. It was a claim. He lifted her, his arms wrapping around her legs as if she weighed nothing, and carried her from the living room. It was not a rushed, frantic act. It was a slow, deliberate unwrapping of two people who had been lonely for a very, very long time. It was emotional. It was passionate. It was affirming. His hands, the ones that held so much power, were impossibly gentle. His mouth, which could command an army of violent men, was tender, worshipful. He kissed the fear from her skin, the exhaustion from her bones, and she met him touch for touch. Her hands, which were worn from work, were not afraid of his scars. She kissed the man who was a boss, a killer, a protector, and a terrible cook, and she chose all of him. In the quiet of her small apartment, with a bodyguard on the landing and a rival gang in the shadows, two broken people were choosing warmth over loneliness. It was a desperate, beautiful, and terrifying affirmation, and in the morning, they both knew. Nothing would ever be the same. The morning of the custody hearing was cold and gray, the sky a flat, bruised purple. Emily stood in her small bedroom, dressed in a simple, cobalt blue dress, just as Rinaldi had instructed. It was a color that was supposed to project stability and trustworthiness. She just felt like a fraud, a diner waitress dressed in a costume for a life she didn't understand. "You ready?" Dom's voice came from the doorway. He wasn't in her apartment, he was in her life. He had stayed the night, sleeping on her lumpy sofa, a silent, 6'3" guard. Sal had slept in the black sedan parked at the curb. "As I'll ever be," she said, her voice trembling. He walked to her, not touching her, but standing close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. He was in one of his dark, perfect suits, a steel gray tie knotted at his throat. He looked like a businessman, a banker, a CEO. He did not look like the man who had cried out her name in the darkness of her bedroom. "He can't win." "Emily," Dom said, his voice a low rumble. "He can still hurt us. Dom, that's all he's ever wanted to do." He held out his hand, not in a gesture of passion but of solidarity, a partnership. She placed her trembling hand in his fingers, warm and calloused, wrapped around hers, and the knot of fear in her stomach loosened just a fraction. "Sal has Leo," he said. "He thinks he's going to the zoo with Sal and two other friends. He's safe. Rinaldi is meeting us at the courthouse." "Okay." She took a deep breath. "Okay." The walk from the car to the courtroom was a blur of clicking heels on marble floors. The air smelled of old paper and floor wax. Dom kept his hand on the small of her back, a proprietary, protective touch that made people step out of their path. The courtroom was smaller than she expected. Travis was already there, sitting with his lawyer, a man with a shark's smile and slicked back hair. Travis looked pale, his eyes darting nervously from his lawyer to the door, to the judge's empty bench. When he saw Emily, he smirked, but when he saw Dom walk in behind her, his hand still on her back, the smirk vanished. Travis's face went white. He visibly shrank in his suit. "All rise," the bailiff called. The next 2 hours were the worst kind of torture. Travis's lawyer was a showman. He painted Emily as a reckless, unstable, and desperate woman. He used the words from the petition. "This is a mother, Your Honor, who has willingly, knowingly, exposed her 6-year-old son to the criminal underworld. She claims an ability to provide, but suddenly her lease is paid. Her car is fixed. She has a new, expensive wardrobe? Objection, Rinaldi said, his voice a dry rasp. My client is wearing a dress purchased for $34. If counsel would like to see the receipt, I have it. The judge sustained the objection, but the lawyer continued, his voice dripping with insinuation. She has been seen on numerous occasions being chauffeured by men in black cars. And then there is the man she is living with. He didn't say it. He didn't have to. Everyone knew the arrangement. And who is this man? The lawyer thundered, pacing. This new father figure in Leo Cordell's life. It is a man known to this city, a man with a history. I am speaking, Your Honor, of Domenico Ferrano. A collective, quiet gasp went through the courtroom. Dom, who was sitting directly behind Emily, did not move. He did not blink. He stared at the back of Travis's head. Travis, Emily noted, was sweating. He was terrified, but not of the lawyer. He was terrified of the man sitting behind his ex-wife. This is the man she has brought into her home, the boss of the Ferrano syndicate, a man whose name is synonymous with violence, with fear, with disappearances. And she wants you to believe this is a safe environment for a child. She has made her choice. Your Honor, she has chosen a gangster's money over her own son's safety. Emily felt the world tilt. She felt sick. Then, Rinaldi stood up. He did not thunder. He did not pace. He walked slowly to the judge's bench and placed a series of neat, bound files on the desk. Your Honor, he said, his quiet voice cutting through the silence. Counsel makes a compelling, if fictional, story. Here are the facts. Here is a notarized bank statement for a trust fund, established in Leo Varella's name 3 years ago by his great-aunt, which Miss Varela, in her modesty, has declined to touch. It was a lie, a beautiful, perfect ironclad lie. Here are the payment stubs for her diner lease, which she has paid, on time, for 4 years. Here is the title for her car. As for my clients' associations, Mr. Ferrano is here today as a family friend, who, yes, has offered his support and protection to a single mother being harassed by her unstable ex-husband. He turned. And as for that, I have here Mr. Cordell's bank statements. I am curious how he affords his sports car and his fiancée's extensive shopping habits on his salary. I am curious about these cash deposits, made every Friday, from an account I can trace directly to. That's enough, Mr. Rinaldi, the judge said, his face grim. Travis had gone from white to a sickly, greenish gray. The judge looked at Emily, his eyes not unkind. Miss Varela, your choice in companions is concerning, but Mr. Cordell's petition seems to be born of malice, not concern for the child. I am granting you continued full custody. Emily's body went limp with relief. However, the judge continued, I am not blind to the irregularities of this situation. I am opening a 6-month review. A social worker will be assigned. Any misstep, Miss Varela, any hint of danger, and you will be back here, and I will not be so lenient. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Emily whispered. Thank you. Outside, in the marble hallway, the relief was so sharp Emily felt dizzy. Dom's hand was on her back, his voice in her ear. You did it. You're okay. This isn't over, Emily. Travis came barreling toward them, his face purple with rage. His lawyer was trying to hold him back. You think you won? You think he can protect you? I will. He stopped mid-sentence. Dom hadn't moved. He hadn't said a word. He just looked at him. It was the same look from the school fair, the look from the alley. But this was worse. It was a look of profound, absolute finality. It was not a threat of violence. It was a promise of erasure. It said, You are a fly. You are a speck of dust, and I am about to exhale. Travis's words died in his throat. He physically stumbled backward, his false bravado vanishing, replaced by a raw, primal fear. He turned and practically ran down the hall. Let's go, Dom said, his voice low, his hand guiding Emily away. They were in the back of the sedan, Dom on one side, Emily on the other. Sal was driving, the partition up. They were 10 blocks from the courthouse, stopped at a red light. Emily was just starting to breathe. Dom Rinaldi, the trust fund. A legal necessity, he said, his eyes on the street. It was brilliant. It was... He never finished the sentence. The sound was like a bomb. A dark green sedan, a car she'd seen lurking in the rearview mirror, blew through the red light and aimed directly at Emily's passenger door. "Dom!" she screamed. Time slowed. She saw the other driver's face, grim and set. She saw Dom, in a single, impossible motion, launching himself across the car, his body covering hers, shielding her, bracing for an impact that would kill them both. The impact never came. There was a second, louder screech of tires, a sickening crunch of metal on metal. Emily opened her eyes. Dom was still on top of her, his heart hammering against her chest. She looked out his window. A massive black SUV, one of Dom's, had appeared from a side street. It had T-boned the green sedan, plowing it into a lamppost, its engine hissing steam. The timing was too perfect. Sal, his face a mask of cold fury, had already put the car in gear and was tearing through the intersection. "Dom, what was that?" she panted, her voice thin. He pushed himself off her, his face a thundercloud. He was breathing heavily, his eyes black with a rage she had never seen. "That," he said, his voice a low, terrifying growl, "was Volpe. And he wasn't aiming for the car. He was aiming for you." The SUV hadn't been an interceptor by chance. It had been a shadow, one of Dom's bodyguard cars, following them just in case. They knew she was the target. When they got to her apartment, the street was full. 4 black sedans, not just one. Men in dark suits were on every corner. Dom walked into her apartment, went straight to her closet, and pulled out an empty suitcase. He threw it on the bed. "Pack," he said. "What?" "Pack a bag. Essentials. For you and Leo. We're leaving. Now." "Where are we going? Dom, you're scaring me." "Good," he said, his voice sharp. "You should be scared." He grabbed her arms, his grip hard, his eyes boring into hers. "They just tried to kill you. Emily, in broad daylight. They were willing to sacrifice a car and 2 men to get to you. This apartment is not safe. Your life, the life you know, it's over." They relocated to a place that wasn't a home. It was a fortress, a penthouse apartment in an unnamed building downtown, with windows of thick, bulletproof glass and a private elevator that required a key card and a thumbprint. It was sterile, beautiful, and terrifying. And it was where the 3 of them, Emily, Leo, and Dom, were now living. The tension in the air was a living thing. Dom was on the phone, his voice a low, angry growl, in a language she didn't understand. Men came and went. Sal, Rinaldi, and a new man, an older, silver-haired man with kind eyes and a hard mouth. She heard him talking to Dom in the vast, empty living room, his voice the only one Dom didn't seem to silence. "Domenico," the older man said, his voice full of gravel and concern. "This is a mistake. You brought them here? They are safer with me. Marco?" "Are they?" Marco, his second-in-command, challenged. "This isn't a shipment, Dom. This isn't a territory dispute. You, me, Sal. We chose this life. They didn't. Volpe knows your weakness now. He's not coming after your business. He's coming after what makes you human." Dom was silent. Marco placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've been a ghost for 5 years. You've been smart. But this makes you predictable. Be careful. My friend, a man with something to lose is a man who can be broken." The sterile quiet of the safe house was worse than the noise of her old apartment. Leo was the only one who didn't seem to notice. He thought this was a grand adventure, a new, giant house, a TV as big as a wall, and, best of all, Mr. D was always there. Emily found them one afternoon, sitting on the thick, white carpet, building a city out of a ridiculously expensive set of wooden blocks. "This is the bank, Mr. D," Leo said, stacking a cylinder. "And this is my house." "Good. The bank should be close to your house," Dom said, his voice serious, as if he were discussing a real estate deal. "Mr. D?" Leo asked, his voice small, his hands still. "When the bad guys go away." Will you still come over for dinner, or will you be too busy at your office?" Dom froze. His hand, which was holding a small, red triangular block, stopped mid-air. Emily watched, her heart clenching. Leo, in his innocence, had just asked the one question no one could answer. What happens after? Dom's face, which could hold so much rage and so much tenderness, went utterly blank. He couldn't answer. He couldn't promise a forever when he was the very reason now was so dangerous. The silence stretched. Dom started, his voice rough. He couldn't make a promise he couldn't keep, and he couldn't tell a 6-year-old boy the truth. He gently placed the block on the carpet. "I have to make a call. Leo." He stood up and walked, not to his office, but to the vast, dark window, turning his back on both of them. Emily watched his silent heartbreak. He was the king of a violent, broken world, and he had just been defeated by a 6-year-old's question. That night, the apartment was tomb silent. Leo was asleep in a bedroom that was bigger than her old living room. Emily found Dom, just as he had been that afternoon, standing at the window, staring down at the city lights. He was a prisoner in his own tower. She came up behind him, not saying a word. She wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing her cheek against the hard, warm muscle of his back. He was rigid for a moment, a man unused to comfort. Then, with a long, shuddering sigh, he sagged, his hands coming up to cover hers, holding them tightly against him. "I can't protect you," he whispered, his voice raw. "I brought this on you. I brought me on you. That boy, Leo, he asks me about after, and I don't know if there is an after. Emily." She turned him, forcing him to face her. She put her hands on his chest, feeling the frantic, trapped beat of his heart. "Stop," she said, her voice fierce. "Stop it. I am not the woman you lost. Dom, I am not a ghost. I am here. We are here. You are not a monster. You are a man, and you are the man I love. We are in this together." The word love hung in the air between them, a desperate, dangerous, and beautiful thing. His face crumbled. The control, the fury, the mask of the boss, it all fell away, leaving the man she'd seen in the hospital, the man who had burned her pasta. He pulled her to him, his mouth crashing onto hers. This was not the tender exploration of their first time. This was a desperate, grounding, and intense claiming. It was a kiss that said, "I am alive. You are alive. We are here." It was a fight against the darkness, against Volpe, against the green sedan, against the ghosts. He lifted her, his arms like steel, and carried her to the bedroom, his mouth never leaving hers. This was not soft. It was raw. It was a desperate need to feel, to connect, to anchor themselves in a world that was trying to tear them apart. His hands were on her, his touch possessive, desperate, his skin on her skin a necessary friction. He was memorizing her, branding her, trying to pour all of his fear and love and rage into a single, physical act. She met him with the same intensity, her hands tracing his scars, her legs wrapping around him, pulling him closer, as if she could absorb him, protect him. It was a collision. It was a grounding. Later, as they lay tangled in the sheets, the city lights painting patterns on the walls, he held her, his arm a heavy, warm bar across her stomach. He was still awake, his eyes open. Staring at the ceiling, he turned, pressing his face into her hair, his voice a low, rough whisper against her skin. "I'll never let them near you, or him. I swear it, Emily, on my mother, on my life. I will never let them touch you." It was not just a promise. It was a vow, and in their world, a vow, like a threat, was a thing of blood. The gilded cage of the safe house was quiet, but it was not calm. It was the quiet of a coiled spring, of a breath held too long. Dom was a lion in this sterile, white box, pacing, his energy too big, too violent for the plush rugs and glass walls. He was on the phone, his voice a low, constant growl, and the city was his chessboard. Spread out on the coffee table in the form of maps, security reports, and grainy surveillance photos, Marco, his silver-haired second-in-command, arrived just after midnight. He looked exhausted, and he was holding a thin file. "You were right," Marco said, his voice grim. "Volpe's men weren't just warning her in that parking lot. They were testing the perimeter. And they had help." Dom's head came up. He'd been staring at a photo, his expression murderous. "Who?" Marco slid a black and white photo across the table. It was from a bank's ATM. He was sloppy, greedy, and stupid. Emily, who had been sitting on the sofa, her knees pulled to her chest, stood up. She knew that coat. She knew that slicked back, thinning hair. It was Travis. "He met with Volpe's men 3 times, Marco said, his voice flat. "The first time, he thought he was just giving information to a private investigator to dig up dirt for the custody case. The second time, they offered him money, $10,000. "For what?" Emily whispered, her voice sick. "For your routine," Dom answered, his voice a low, terrifying rasp. He hadn't taken his eyes off the photo. "Your shift schedule, what time you picked up Leo, the bus route you used to take, the make of your car, your mechanic's name." "He sold us," Emily said. The realization was a cold, physical blow. The anonymous tips to social services, the timing of the custody hearing. He had been feeding Volpe information, thinking he was just getting leverage, all for $10,000. He had, in his pathetic, greedy ignorance, painted a target on his own son's back. He didn't know who they were, Marco said, a small, cold comfort. He thought they were just competition. He had no idea he was dealing with Volpe, and he was just a rat, taking a piece of cheese. "Get him," Dom said, his voice devoid of all emotion. "Get him, and bring me the tape from his last meeting." "Domenico," Marco warned. "Get it," Dom ordered. The next day, the illusion of a normal life had to be maintained. Leo was, for all intents and purposes, a normal 6-year-old. He had to go to school. "It's the safest place for him," Dom had argued, his voice tight. "They're expecting us to hide him. We won't. We will put him in the open and we will guard him. Sal will be with him, and 2 other men are already inside. One is a new janitor. One is a substitute teacher. He will not be out of our sight for a single second." Emily kissed her son at the private elevator, her hand trembling as she smoothed his hair. "Be good for Sal." "Okay, baby." "Is Sal in trouble?" Leo asked, looking at the stone-faced bodyguard. "No, sweetie. Sal's a friend. He's just, going to school with you today." The call came at 11:03. Dom was in his office, the door closed. Emily was staring at a news report on the giant TV, not hearing a word. Her phone, a new one Dom had given her, buzzed. It was Sal. "Miss Varela, stay calm. We have a situation. Leo is not in his classroom." Emily's world ended. It didn't tilt. It didn't gray. It just stopped. The sound in her ears was a high-pitched, deafening whine. She couldn't feel her hands. "What? What do you—" "Sal. What?" "A fire drill. Someone pulled the alarm. It was a decoy. In the chaos. A woman, dressed as a nurse. Led him away. He's gone. We're locking the school down now. But, Emily, he's gone." The phone dropped from her hand when Dom burst out of the office, his own phone to his ear. He found her on her knees, rocking back and forth, making a small, animal sound. "No, no, 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 no. Emily." He grabbed her, his hands like steel bands on her arms, forcing her to look at him. "He's not gone. Do you hear me? He is not gone. He is taken, and I am going to get him back." She looked at him, her eyes vacant, a stranger in her own body. She was paralyzed. The terror was so absolute, so complete, it had short-circuited her. "Watch her," Dom barked at Marco, who was already at the door, 2 more men behind him. "Lock this place down, no one in, no one out, and get me Rinaldi." He was gone. The next 4 hours were a living nightmare. Emily sat on the white carpet, her back against the sofa. She had found it, the small, die-cast black sedan, for the bravest boy I know. She just sat there, turning it over and over in her hands, her mind blank. The city went on lockdown. It wouldn't be on the news, but every street corner, every toll booth, Every bridge and tunnel was being watched. Every associate, every debtor, every friend, and every enemy of the Ferrano syndicate was being called. The city's underworld was being shaken so hard. Rats were fleeing from holes they had hidden in for years. Domenico Ferrano was looking for his son. The ding of the private elevator was the only sound. Emily's head snapped up. The doors opened. Dom stood there. He was a wreck. His suit jacket was gone. His tie was ripped away, the top 2 buttons of his shirt undone. There was a long, black smudge of axle grease on his jaw. He looked like he had been to war. He was not alone. In his arms, he was carrying a sleeping Leo. Leo was unharmed. He was clutching a half-eaten bag of gummy bears, and his face was sticky with tears and sugar. Emily's soul flew back into her body. A sound, a choked, desperate sob, ripped from her throat. She scrambled across the carpet, her legs weak. "I got him," Dom whispered, his voice rough. He sank to his knees, his own body trembling with the adrenaline crash. Emily wrapped her arms around both of them, burying her face in Leo's hair. Her body shaking so violently she could barely breathe. "My baby! Oh, my baby, my baby!" "They never had him," Dom said, his voice thick. His eyes closed in relief. Volpe's men. They pulled the drill. A woman, a new nurse's aide, took his hand. "But my men, my janitor." He saw. They took her down in the stairwell. She never even made it out of the building, but she had a needle. She was going to sedate him. The hours she had waited. It had been minutes. The rest of the time, Dom's men had been taking the woman apart, finding out who had sent her, where the car was, who her contact was. They had kept Leo safe, in the school's kitchen, feeding him candy, while Dom himself went to the staging ground, a dark blue van 2 blocks away, and extracted the other men. "He's safe, Emily," Dom said, his hand shaking, coming up to cover hers. "He's safe. I have him." A week later, the school held its spring fair. It was meant to replace the one that had been so horribly interrupted by a prank fire alarm. "We're not going," Emily said, her voice flat. She hadn't left the safe house. "Yes, we are," Dom said. He was standing in front of her, dressed in casual, dark jeans and a gray Henley that made his shoulders look impossibly broad. He was no longer hiding. "We are not going to live in this tower. Emily, we are not going to hide. We are going to live. We are going to finish this." He held out his hand. "I am not the man you lost. You are not the woman I'm going to hide. We are going to the fair." It was a declaration of war. They arrived, not in a black sedan, but in a simple, dark gray SUV. Dom was driving, Emily was in the passenger seat. Leo was in the back. Sal, Marco, and 3 other men were already there, dressed as parents, their children, nieces and nephews of the family. With them, they were a perimeter. The moment they stepped onto the patchy grass, the entire fair went silent, the same tinny music, the same smell of popcorn. But this time, it was different. The parents, the teachers, they all stared. They had seen the news. Notorious recluse Domenico Ferrano, new family. The whispers were deafening. And then, Emily saw him. Travis. He was standing near the ring toss, just as before, but he was not the same man. He was a ghost. His suit was rumpled, his face was gray, his eyes hollow and terrified. Rinaldi's case was crushing him. Volpe's men were gone. The $10,000 was long gone. He was a man with nothing left to lose, and it made him pathetic and dangerous. He saw them. His eyes locked on Emily, and a new, desperate hatred filled his face. He started toward them, his steps uneven. "You, he hissed, his voice cracking. You bitch. You did this. You ruining me." Dom stepped in front of Emily. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. He just looked at Travis. Then he walked past him. He walked past the broken, sputtering man, as if he were a piece of trash on the sidewalk. He walked right to Leo, who was staring at the beanbag toss. "Want to go high, kid?" Dom rumbled. Leo's face lit up. "Mister, duh." In one smooth, practiced motion, Dom scooped Leo up and settled him on his shoulders. The boy cheered, his small hands holding onto Dom's head. Dom turned, slowly, and faced the silent, watching crowd. His eyes found Travis, who was frozen in the middle of the lawn, a monument to his own failure. "This is my family now," Dom said. His voice wasn't a shout. It was a clear, cold, absolute statement of fact. It carried across the lawn, over the music, into every phone camera that was now recording. And he looked at Travis, a dead, final dismissal. "Let your ex watch." Travis's face crumpled. It was the soundless, agonizing collapse of a man who had just lost everything and knew he deserved it. The crowd was a sea of stunned, silent faces. The media would explode. The city would explode. Dom didn't care. He lowered a giggling Leo to the ground. He turned to Emily. Her face was wet with tears, but they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of release, of love, of a fierce, terrifying pride. She walked up to him, right there, in the center of the lawn, in front of the parents, the teachers, the cameras, and her broken ex-husband. She grabbed the front of his Henley, stood on her toes, and she kissed him. It was not a chase kiss. It was a deep, passionate, claiming kiss. It was her, choosing him. It was her, mirroring his declaration. "This is my family. This is my man. Let the world watch." The aftermath was immediate. Rinaldi, with a quiet, vicious precision, released the tape. The media didn't get it, but the district attorney did. The tape of Travis Cordell accepting a cash-filled envelope from a known associate of Antonio Volpe. The tape of him, callously, greedily, giving them Emily's schedule. He was arrested that afternoon, not for custody violations, for felony reckless endangerment, conspiracy, and collusion. His threats were not just gone. He was gone. That night, the safe house was quiet. The danger was over. Volpe had pulled back, his move a spectacular, public failure. He had lost men. He had lost face, and he had lost the element of surprise. He would not be back. Dom stood at the window, staring at the city. It was his, again. "We can go," he said, his voice quiet. He didn't turn. "Rinaldi has it all arranged, a new life, a small town in Oregon." He said, "Good schools. No one would ever know. New names, a new house. You and Leo, you would be safe. You would be normal." He was offering her the one thing she had always wanted. He was offering to let her go. Emily came up behind him, the last time she would ever do so in this sterile, glass prison. She wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing her cheek against his back. "Is that what you want, Domenico?" she whispered. "To send me away?" He turned in her arms, his face a mask of pained, raw love. "I want you to be safe. You make me feel safe," she said, her hand coming up to rest on his heart. It was steady. "Even when the world isn't, I'm not running. Dom, I am not the woman you lost. I'm the one who is staying." She rose on her toes, her eyes locked with his. "I choose this. I choose you." The final scene was not in a penthouse. It was not in a cramped apartment. It was 6 months later, in a backyard, a real backyard, with green grass that smelled freshly cut, and a high, old, brick wall covered in ivy. The security was invisible, but it was absolute. Sal, who now smiled, was at the front gate, reading a racing form. Leo, now 7, was running across the lawn, chasing a small, yapping dog. He was laughing, the sound high and free. Emily was on a wooden porch swing, a glass of iced tea sweating in her hand. She was wearing a simple, yellow sundress. She looked at peace. She heard the footsteps on the porch. She didn't have to turn. Dom. He wasn't in a suit. He was in a soft, worn-out linen shirt and jeans. He was home. He came up behind the swing, his large hands resting on her shoulders, stopping its gentle motion. He said nothing. He just bent, his shadow covering her, and pressed his lips to the warm, sensitive skin of her neck, just below her ear. She sighed, her head falling back against his chest. "You saved me, too," he whispered against her skin. "Thank you so much for listening to our story. We are so incredibly grateful to have you here. Please let us know in the comments where in the world you're listening from. We love to see how far our stories travel. If you enjoyed this, Please consider subscribing to Mafia Romance Stories for more content just like this. And don't forget to share your thoughts on this part. We read every single comment.